I've not heard anything from his office, which I'm a bit disappointed about, but I don't have a pecuniary interest, so I intend to take part in the meeting.
Okay, that's fine, thank you. Assembly Member Duval.
I'm not sure if I should register this, but in light of Assembly Member Prince's declaration, I am a season ticket holder of West Ham, which is one of the main tenants of the stadium.
You have my condolences as well. Right, item 3 is minutes of the previous meeting. Can we agree that they are correct records?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Item 4 is the GLA Group monitoring reports. Can we note the monitoring reports for Q1 of 17-18?
Yep. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Good. You passed the test. Okay, item 5 is the LLDC, the main item of business for today. And I'd like to welcome this session's guests. So we have Martin Clark, who is the Director of Resources at the GLA, David Bellamy, a regular attender here as the Mayor's Chief of Staff, David Goldstone, the Chief Executive of the LLDC, and what I think is probably your penultimate appearance in front of the Assembly, is it?
That's probably right, yeah.
We have the joyous experience of a plenary meeting coming up in a couple of weeks. And Jerry Murphy, who is the Deputy Chief Executive of the LLDC. Welcome to all 4 of you. Thank you very much indeed for giving up your time. The opening series of questions falls, as is tradition, to me, and unsurprisingly it's about the stadium, which occupies a lot of our attention. The first one is to you, David Bellamy, Mr. Bellamy. And this is about the Moore-Stevens review that was commissioned some time ago. And as you are aware, there was a question like that at Mayor's Question Time, one before last, I believe. Mm-hmm. And the Mayor indicated that it would be published by around about the 22nd of September. We haven't seen it. There was a written answer to Assembly Member Boff that was released last night as well, in which various things were asked for. Can you update us on where the review is and why information has not yet been forthcoming?
Yeah, certainly, Chairman. Good afternoon, everyone. In the written answer that you refer to, the Mayor says that he's very disappointed that Moore-Stevens have yet to complete the review. I think that's diplomatic underspeak. I think we all, probably all members of the authority, share that disappointment and that frustration. Martin, as the officer who's been acting as the client for that review, I'll allow him to add in on some of the detail about how that's been going on. It's clear that Moore-Stevens have had some challenges in terms of securing some of the historic documentation that they need in order to carry out that review, and that some of the things they need to do clearly have taken longer than they anticipated. It is, of course, an independent review, and we want to ensure that Moore-Stevens do the work they feel that needs to be done in order that we have conclusions that we all can rely on, because clearly, as indicated, this is a really important topic indeed, and we want all the facts to be out. But equally, the repeated delays here are just not acceptable, and that's why I've asked Martin to arrange for Moore-Stevens to come in and see me, which will happen on Friday, in order that I can firstly express the Mayor's frustration and displeasure over this delay, and secondly understand from them directly how we can bring this matter to a quick conclusion, and the authority can receive a report which the Mayor can then move quickly to publish, because I believe that's what all of us wish to see happen.
Mr. Clark, would you like to add to that?
I'd add, I suppose, to try a bit of colour, is the process they've adopted is to try and review all the available documentation relating to the stadium, which obviously goes back at least 10 years, for them to understand all the key sort of written decisions, reports, advice, etc. On the basis of that is then identify what questions do they want to put to individuals. And I think that is, doing it that way round, and I'm not telling them how to do the review, I think is led to have been more protracted, because maybe speaking to some individuals earlier might have made some shortcuts into that. And they have had, not being apologising, they have had difficulties getting all the information. I'll just give one example as illustration, and I'm not criticising. For example, on the 13th of March, I wrote to a Director General in DCMS asking for their cooperation in finding documents and releasing them. I didn't get a reply to that letter until the 24th of April, saying they would assist. There's a sort of a qualified assistance, and he talked about Jerry Murphy's intervention, offering how could we help them do it. And then it wasn't until the 14th of July that they provided the documents they said to provide, and then at the beginning of August, Moore Stephens identified lots of gaps. So this process, I wanted to look at all the documentation and the response, and then probably the volume, has caused to take obviously an awful lot longer than I anticipated.
Who are they supposed to be getting the documentation from?
You go back in the history, so you've got government departments that are involved in stadium decisions. Primarily, the principal one is DCMS because of their involvement with the Olympics. They have documentation relating to the Olympic Delivery Authority that was involved at that stage, which
so who's got that
DCMS are now
documentation?
Custodians of.
Right, okay.
And then there is documentation in Newham, in LLDC, there is a vast range of organisations.
Okay, I mean, I can understand that we can't compel the DCMS to hand stuff over. We certainly can compel the LLDC to, and given that Newham are party to the board, I'm struggling to see why there would be a problem there. So who else is causing a logjam?
I'm not saying anyone's causing the logjam. I think it's a number of parties that's involved.
Well, to help you out, Mr. Clark, the written response that we had yesterday, and Mr. Bellamy's just confirmed today, suggests that there's been some difficulty in acquiring all the documentation required to then be reviewed, to then start doing the investigation. That would suggest that there has been a logjam in terms of getting information out of them.
Yes, but that is, it's hard to be specific, other than to sort of generalise, is the number of bodies that were involved in decisions, because many decisions around the stadium were taken by multiple parties, and it is when, and then obviously when they get a suite of documents, you might be, you say get a committee report or where it's a decision making, and if they think that was a key decision, their line of inquiry would say, well, okay, then what advice was provided? That leads you into the supply train of the officials and contracts consultants providing that advice.
Okay, when was the executive decision signed off to commence this work? I can't remember. I've seen it, but I can't remember what the date was.
It would have been shortly before my letter to DCMS, because that was an initial starting point. So it's going to be late February, early March, that time. So initial action, I need DCMS to provide everything.
So when Moore Stephens were commissioned to do the work, they presumably put a proposal in which would involve a timeline.
Yes.
Okay, what was the timeline?
The original timeline was 3 months.
So from February, March, we thought it would be delivered by June.
Yes, and end of June was the initial plan. Given the initial hiatus, that date quickly slipped to the end of July, and then without clarity, it's been dragging on. And just by way of illustration, this bundle here is mainly correspondence with them, chasing, facilitating, asking for information, etc. Okay. So they will obviously they will can explain for themselves why it's taken so long in the process and the difficulties they had. And I think at times I think there's some confusion.
Okay, how much are we paying them to do this? I can't remember the precise pound, but the contract valued, the nearest round figure is 150,000. Okay. And what do we think that they're going to add that hasn't already been covered by scrutiny committees at the Assembly?
I don't think they'll add anything.
So why did you commission them?
Pardon?
Why did you commission them?
Sorry, I thought you were talking about the future. I misheard your question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Why did we commission more Stevens? I mean, there's been umpteen examinations of the LLDC, the stadium, etc., conducted by the Assembly and others. What do we think the more Stevens are going to add to the sum total of knowledge in exchange for that money?
I personally don't think we know why are we in the position we are in now, which you're going to ask questions on. Is it due to events that have happened over time, or was it due to the initial handful of key decisions around the stadium? I generally don't think we do know. We know at the time the report was commissioned, we didn't really know, because it was in the first year of operation of the football club, how much running the stadium was in a steady state. We've now, and therefore part of the remit of the review was to give clarity to that as it happens, as time goes on, and part of our, I think it's principally down to Jerry and the team, as part of doing the 16/7 accounts and doing all the issues of the close down, we obviously now got a much better picture, a very clear picture, of the costs and income relating to E20 in the stadium, which we didn't have when this work was commissioned.
Okay. So how much oversight has been conducted of what Moore Stevens are up to since they were commissioned?
Oversight in the sense that there's been no oversight. I haven't given any oversight telling them what to do. My role as client has been to try and facilitate them getting information and facilitate getting the people they want to interview to agree to be interviewed, and fundamentally for the past couple of months it has been chasing, asking for a date. When are we going to get it?
Because I mean the problem that we've got obviously is that it's £150,000 of taxpayers' money. I don't think I or my colleagues are getting a tremendous sense of reassurance that that's been money well spent so far, because they are 4 months and counting beyond the date that they said they would do it. They're over a month beyond the date that the Mayor suggested when he was questioned about it in a public meeting, that they would provide it. I imagine, and perhaps Mr Bellamy can confirm or deny this, but I imagine the Mayor is not particularly thrilled that the estimate that he put out in a public meeting has been proven to be, or has been undermined by Moore Stevens. I mean, we have the power here to summons all documentation relating to this, and we may do that at some point. It might even be today, because I'm not feeling terribly confident from what I've heard so far. Does any colleague have a view? Mr Bellamy.
If I may, I think Martin has given an account there from the kind of client perspective. I think if there's anything the committee needs, it's to hear an account from Moore Stevens, and the committee should hold them to account for what they have done. From my side, I'm very keen that we don't do anything that gets in the way of them producing the final report, because I think we all have a shared interest in getting this report produced and published so that the public have transparency about what decisions were made and when, and the factors that went into the financial status of the stadium. And I want that to come to a conclusion very quickly. And I think what I would say is that I'm going to meet the partner at Moore Stevens on Friday. I'm very happy to write to the committee quickly following that to share what commitments have been given, and I think collectively we need to hold them to account and to ensure they deliver that, because we all want to receive this final report and we all want to get it published.
Are Moore Stevens still in the information gathering exercise, or are we approaching the emerging conclusions stage of the process?
They're at the stage when they're interviewing, going through a series of interviews with key participants in the past. As a result of those interviews, at times, and I think David can give an example of a recent interview he has, they will say, well, can you give some documentation?
So they're still information
relating to
gathering
that.
now?
Pardon?
They're still information gathering?
Only in response to what people say. So if someone says X, can you...
So they're verifying information they've
Yes,
received?
what people are saying.
So that they're still doing their basic research rather than...
No, I think they've done all their basic research, and I think they've formed their opinion of all the key matters, but that has to be tested with the people who are involved in the decisions at the time. So if I was interviewed and I say something, I might have to provide some follow-up information. So I really do think that they're very much at the concluding stage.
The concluding stage of the information gathering stage?
No, the concluding
Are they
stage.
writing up their findings now?
Yes.
So
Because the way they structured it, that I'm certain they have formed a clear view of what they think has happened and why we are where we are now. And in the way I think they're at the confirmation stage.
Okay.
But when you're going through the confirmation stage, you might have to go, you hear something, you might need to go back and check it again.
All right, on the basis of that, when would you expect to receive a final report?
Well, that's what we will hear on Friday. I've given David and the Mayor estimates, which I've been wrong in the past. But I can't see any reason why it should not be within the next 2 to 3 weeks.
All right. I've seen Assembly members Shah and then Arnold.
Chair, sorry. Chair, my question was about anticipated new date for publication of the report. You indicated now 2 to 3 weeks. If there is going to be any slippage, or in any case, could David, you're meeting the consultants, etc. You're meeting on Friday, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Can you please confirm after that meeting whether what is the realistic publication date so that we know where we are, and would be very helpful to know to have this published before, if possible, our plenary session, which is on LLDC and issues like this on 3rd of November.
I'm certainly happy to undertake to write back and let you know what commitment Moore Stephens are giving. And as I say, on behalf of, with permission on behalf of this committee as well as the Mayor, I'm happy to, speak to Moore Stephens in very strong terms about the need to get this work brought to a conclusion. We all want to see this thing published.
Okay. Assembly Member Arnold.
I think Assemblymember Shah has covered the points I was making, and David's response in terms of the eagerness, the level of authority that you're going to convey to this organisation. I would hope that would mean that they would be able to give you an end date, which then could be sent to the chair.
Yes, I will do that.
Could I just, sorry.
I've got Assembly Member Pitchin first, and then Assembly Member Deval.
2 quick questions. Just wondering if Martin or David, first of all, have you had any indication from them of where they're looking, where they have found concerns? Have they given you any feedback at all yet?
The indications I had is, in a way, might be playing in the Chairman's question, is the pivotal decisions, as they see them, is around in ending the first disposal process to West Ham. So the issues around that, which they're focused on, and the subsequent second process, which saw the tenants, going to West Ham. They're the two
key areas.
milestones they are focused on. So they've looked at all the decisions that were taken up to, early decisions on what's the Olympic Stadium going to look like for the games, etc. But the decisions which they believe is results in the cost we got now around those two events.
Okay, so that's not too historic in terms of pulling out. Okay, that's helpful. And then to David Goldstone, when were you interviewed by these accountants?
The 9th of October, week last Monday.
So you were only interviewed on the 9th of
9th of
October.
That was the second. I had one session the previous week as well, so I've had two.
So when was the first one?
The previous week.
So basically early October.
Yes.
Was the first time you've been interviewed. Well, then I think
I should say we've provided enormous amounts of information of all the board decisions, all the decision making that's been through LLDC and of course the
That's fine, and it's not your fault at all either. By the way, it's more Stephen's fault. But given that the Mayor made an undertaking that the report will be published on the 22nd of September, and Moore Stevens didn't get around to interviewing you for the first time until after that date, and you're the Chief Executive of the LLDC, that does raise even more concerns in the minds of the people sitting on this side of the room. And I say that's not your fault. That's aimed squarely at them.
Get a flavour, which we do from that it's
yeah.
You may not get it in the next 2 to 3 weeks by the sound of it.
Assemblymember Deval.
If we work on an assumption, it's 3 to 4 weeks, that puts us in mid-November. How much time does the GLA, the LDDC, need to look at this piece of work, come up with their response to this work, and have a way forward for the stadium? What's the guesstimate? I appreciate it's a guesstimate because we don't know what the quality of this work is. And it doesn't sound too impressed about the quality of the work at the moment if they're overrunning that level, right? So what do we think do you need in terms of turning round and coming to a view on it? And I take it as one, right? I don't, that your timescales of going to your board is going to be fast-tracked to the mayoral bit. So what is it?
So, firstly, to be clear, it's the GLA who have commissioned this report, not LLDC, so that it's independent of them, because, of course, it may impact views on LLDC decisions in the past. So there are two things, I think, to your question. One is, right, on receipt of the report, how quickly can the GLA publish it? And to my mind, that depends somewhat on what it says. What I would hope is that we receive the report, we read it, it all makes sense, we're happy in terms of the explanation of the work they've done and that it's been thorough enough and that we're happy to put it out, and we just have to prepare the covering material, and we can fact check if we feel we need to, but that shouldn't hopefully be necessary and publish very quickly. That's what we would like to do. Being honest, I have to reserve the possibility that there may be something in their findings that throws up a legal question on which we have to take advice before we're able to publish. I hope not, because I want it to be published as quickly as possible, but until I've seen the report, and I've seen precisely nothing at this stage, I don't know whether that's going to be the case or not. If I do need to take any advice before it can be published, my commitment is to do that absolutely as quickly as I can, because I say we all want this published. The other part of the question is about the kind of what next for the stadium. This may well come out in other questions that you have for David and Jerry. It's fair to say that while this review has been going on and looking primarily at the past and what decisions were made and by whom and how and etc., we've not been idle in terms of understanding the situation we're in regarding the operation and finances of the stadium, identifying those challenges and trying to address those. There are various activities underway, probably many of them not yet at a conclusion, and we obviously want to talk about those when we're at conclusion, but I imagine David will be able to give you an update on all that this afternoon.
When's that bit concluded by? What that bit of work that you've got about the future and some of those issues, when do you think that work is concluded?
I think I would say it's incremental. Some things, some aspects of it, and David can talk through the sort of work that's going on, probably will conclude quite quickly. If you get into other areas and you say, for instance, okay, we need to renegotiate contracts, well, that could potentially take quite a long period of time. Or if you say, well, actually we need to look at the seat infrastructure in the stadium, potentially consider making some changes. I think if were we to consider that, we would want to do it on quite an incremental basis to minimise cost, and so that would take a period of time.
I understand about the actions, the actual actions of doing it, but the recommendations of a way forward, when do we think we'd have those ready? When do you think you have this report from More London, and then alongside it you're going to have a response, and alongside it we're going to see some decisions that seek to resolve. I'm trying to find the right word for this about the stadium, but it's really difficult to write that, because it's not all a mess, but it's pretty messy.
Yeah.
Because it's not all a mess, but it's messy. So what is it that's going to take us out of a messy situation that may take a number of years to resolve?
Yeah.
I'll put my hands up about it. So when are we going to see a set of recommendations around that bit?
So David can give a flavour of what we're doing today. I think my hope is that by the end of November we would be in a position to be saying, right, very much, well, here's a kind of some key decisions, if you like, from the Mayor about the direction we're going to take through those, and what the forward path is through some of the other aspects.
So maybe just to give a bit of flavour on why the answers are of the type they are. There's a number of different strands of work going on, not presuming the outcome of the Moore Stephens work, but not waiting for it because there's things we can see can be start being addressed now without waiting for the outcome. But for example, one of the things that's I think has been referred to before is looking at the seating system that's installed, and actually I suppose there's two interconnected pieces of work. There is a sort of engineering study going on and an exercise to say, is there actually a way what is installed can be made considerably more efficient? I mean, that's made good progress. It's the other aspect of affecting the seating that's interconnected is looking at, with the system we've got, how can we configure it in a more efficient way for different types of events so that we're not incurring the cost of the full seat moves. And just as an example of that, not for this year's athletics, but for last year, we many people won't have noticed, but we didn't move. The East stand wasn't moved. The three other stands were moved, and only the East stand was sort of, some parts were taken off and some blocks were moved, but the whole stand wasn't moved, which saved considerable cost. And so if we can reconfigure the stadium for different modes in those sorts of ways and look at engineering improvements to the system, we can incrementally actually make quite big indents into what is a very significant part of the long-term cost. So those sorts of work, that's going on now. That's not waiting for a decision to, if make want a decision to implement a finding, but it's not waiting work to get on with it. We're looking at another area, for example, around how the crowd management from the stadium, you'll know this, through the park, through the station, and the different entrances and the challenges we have there and the interface with shoppers coming into and out of the Westfield Centre, which is, in some ways, is a sort of symptom of success. It's such a popular, that station is becoming very crowded, and the egress routes need a lot of resource to manage to make sure we're safely looking after those crowds and people are being dispersed as quickly as possible. But we're looking at, and actually we've now got some proposals around that, if you like, we can implement just by agreement with Westfield, with the police, with TfL. It doesn't need a decision, but to actually simplify that and make the channels so that will reduce stewarding costs considerably. So there's things like that we can do that are in train now and that we're looking at taking forward and will make a big difference. So some of the other points, just to finish off, as David said, will require us looking at the contracts and saying, can we get better value out of these agreements by renegotiating aspects, and then you're really it's bilateral negotiations. So
given let's not set aside More London, but let's say that's in hand, albeit it's delayed and we've got that. It's not problematic, or shouldn't be problematic, that we start to schedule in a meeting in mid-December to bring you back for all the caboodle. Because if we can't have More London, then we really ought to concentrate on some of these solutions to reduce these costs. And we just might have to say that, because that's the thing that's exercising committee members, assembly members. And I think, maybe, Chair, we ought to start thinking about mutually agreed dates in December about when that takes place then. Because it does seem to me that unless there is some milestones here, we just drift and drift. And that can't be good in terms of where we are. you know, and I understand the importance of the More London report, but equally, I think, More Stevens report, More London, of where we are. I feel I wish I was in another place. The question then is more about how do we, what's going to be part of taking that forward and resolving the situation, isn't it? So maybe we can look at that.
Yeah, I think we'll take that away and look at it. And one of the things that is a concern is that this report may lead to findings and conclusions that may have an impact on the Mayor's budget proposals for next year. And of course the timing of receiving that report and giving you time to consider it and think it through is important, isn't it? So I think what we'll do is we'll take this away and consider what's been said today, and we'll see where we go with that. And it may be that we have to come back again in a few weeks' time and have another look at it, but we'll get in touch offline. Changing the subject, sort of. Moving away from More Stevens, but talking about the stadium generally. This one is aimed at you, Mr. Goldstone. E20's accounts for last year show that you expect to lose £200 million on the stadium. Does that look fundamentally unprofitable to you? It does to me.
I think that sentence implies that's an annual loss, which of course it isn't. That's a provision. I think the number you're referring to is the provision for the onerous contracts, yes, which is exactly an estimate of an accumulation of many long-term future years' losses. And most importantly, I think Jerry will be closer to the accounting standards than I am, but the way the accounting standards require us to do that is effectively look at it as the business is at the moment, in effect without all the corrective steps of which I started giving you a flavour a few moments ago.
Okay,
so if we didn't fix it, then long term we'd be looking at very significant accumulated losses, and that's what the onerous contracts provision
it means loss making, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
Do you think you are going to fix it?
Well, I think what I've started describing and can say a bit more about is that is absolutely what we've all been focused on in parallel to the work that's been going on looking how do we get here. We've absolutely not been waiting for that to try and start fixing the issues so that we can get into a much better position. It's difficult to say today when so much of that is work that's in train that we can definitely fix it to a specific outcome. I think we're very confident we can make it an awful lot better than it is, and an awful lot better than that provision recognised. Because if we can, for example, in the ways I described, considerably bring down the cost of moving the seats, the costs of stewarding match days. We do think there are opportunities on the income side around the way that rights are split, for example, that we can better manage, and that we'll be able to move the whole business into a much more sustainable long-term position than it is now. So I think we can make it considerably better. That I'm confident about. The More Stevens report will tell us something about the findings from that, and the work we all do in terms of how we take it forward will tell us how far we can go on that. But for the avoidance of doubt, that number you referred to is, if we didn't fix it, provision of long-term losses over a very long period.
Okay. Mr. Clark, how much working capital did the LLDC give to E20 last year for E20 to stay afloat?
Oh gosh, as I understand it, but Jerry might correct me wrong. Last year, 16-17, was it just under 5 million? Yeah,
it's in that ballpark.
4.9 million pounds in 16-17.
Who makes the approval decisions around that? 4.9 million.
Part of it, it requires obviously the approval of the injection working capital requires the approval of the owners of E20. So there's an LLDC decision, and also via their company to make a decision to inject new capital, and above financial thresholds it becomes a mayoral decision. And the fact working capital is to all expenses purposes is a capital investment that gets built into the GLA's capital spending plan and borrowing limits, which the mayor signs off. So it forms, you could say, part of the whole of the LLDC's capital expenditure, because under accounting conventions it is treated as an investment.
Okay. Mr. Bellamy, sorry for being so formal in calling you Mr. Bellamy.
I understand the challenge, yes.
It is challenging. Do you think the LLDC will remain a part owner of E20, and if so, for how long?
I do. I think there's a separate question about the medium to long term future of LLDC as it works through its work, developing the Olympic Park an area which we may come on to later. But I'm not aware of any plans for LLDC to not be involved in the ownership of the stadium.
Okay. Mr. Goldstein, final question from me in this section, then we'll move on. You've commissioned a company called ESP to work with you to find a sponsor for the naming rights of the stadium. And they haven't yet. I believe they had Vodafone lined up and that didn't go where it wanted to go. What progress is being made on that?
We had, you're correct in what you say. At the moment, partly because of all the work that's going on at the moment, we're not actively marketing the rights. But I would say, the stadium. I think Martin said this earlier. We are in a context where a stadium became operationally sort of live just over a year ago. Yeah. I think in the context of securing rights for major venues of this sort, it is often a long-term process. It is something that takes many other venues, a considerable time, and I don't think being in the market for 1 year is unusual in that context. But I think we are effectively not actively marketing it at the moment because of the issues around the future structure, ownership, an operating model, and what it's really going to look like, which will come out of all the decisions we've been touching on. Nonetheless, I should say, we've talked about a lot of the challenges already in this discussion. We had a fantastically successful summer this year with some great concerts and, of course, the World Athletics Championships and the Para-Athletics Championships. Enormous crowds, day in, day out, I think managed very successfully, and the profile of the stadium and the park and the regeneration that's being achieved around it was really, really positive and very well received. And actually, on the back of that, we've had a number of inquiries, sort of unprompted, from very significant brands who've wanted to come and talk to us to start exploring the possibility. And that's happened over the last few weeks since the athletics events concluded, as I say, unprompted, and I think does reflect actually what is a very positive profile for the stadium and for the park and for the area, and that actually the events that have been hosted there have been very successful, have been very well received, and have created a great image. So I remain very confident and positive that with the right partner at the right time, that those benefits will still be secured.
The deal that you did with ESP when they were commissioned to find a partner, is that contingent on success, or have we paid them upfront?
It was contingent on success.
Okay.
I think there was a base retainer, but most of the income was success related.
What was the value of the base retainer?
Could we come back to you on that? We'd have to revert. I haven't got that to hand, but I wouldn't be confident to give you an accurate number if I.
Perhaps write to us afterwards, and I can.
We can come back to you afterwards. Yeah,
that would be very useful. Right, I've seen Assembly Members Desai and Prince in that order.
Just going back to the question of naming rights through your chair, I don't think I can accept your answer, David. Back in January, 5th of January, and I think I asked you this question about naming rights, and your reply was, quote, "I'm very confident that we will secure naming rights, and I do not think there's a fundamental problem." We are now coming up to the end of October. I know these things take time, but you've been on this since last year. What is the problem? You talked about a successful summer. There's stadiums with not the same profile as the London Stadium. And I know these things, you can't compare them necessarily, but they don't seem to have problems securing naming rights. There is something here.
I think it's one of those things where you need the right partner, the right sponsor who wants to spend the money to see that value at the
Vodafone.
Well, so I think
This will be a breakdown every time. Sorry.
Corporate organisations make their decisions about where they want to spend their marketing and sponsorship funds, and obviously they have to make those decisions. And we can offer and promote the venue, but whether finding the right partner who is both, I suppose, sort of compatible with the objectives and the mission and profile of the stadium and its place in what is a unique location and the Olympic connection in the park and the regeneration programme that's around it, and that wants to commit the money for the time that we think it's worth, is something that often takes time. And yeah, I mean, I said in January, as you say, that we were confident, and I remain confident. The fact it's taken longer than we would have hoped doesn't mean that over what is, you know, the very long life of a major asset, we won't successfully secure a partner in time.
Sorry. Yeah, can I just put this to you? Could it be that firms are put off by being unable to brand their name during, say, like during the Athletics World Championship back in the summer, which was effectively sort of held in a clean stadium where a sponsor, if there had been a sponsor of the stadium, they would not have been able to brand their product because just going through some of the press coverage, but according to Tim Crow, our Chief Executive of Sports and Entertainment Marketing Agency Synergy, what he says is effectively you're just becoming a sponsor of West Ham when you have events where you can't brand your product.
Well, I think it's quite usual practice, I think, for the major the sort of global sports events to be held in with sort of clean stadium requirements. It was something that was quite a constraint for the existing venues that were used for the Olympic and Paralympic Games, that they couldn't use their sponsors' names around those events, and it applied here. So I think, you know, what happened this summer with the World Athletics was, and the Para Athletics, was an event that we won't have very often. It'll be, you know, maybe once every number of years, but not frequently. Other events, you know, the concerts, the Diamond League, and obviously the West Ham matches, there's much more regular opportunities. I think one of the challenges we do have is, and I was alluding to this earlier when we were talking about what can we do to make it better, and this is not an easy thing to fix, but I think a challenge we will in time be wanting to resolve is in effect the interest in the rights is split in the way that the current arrangements are set. So West Ham obviously have all their club rights, you know, the shirts and their own sponsors. We have the operator that's managing some of the sort of secondary rights, and there's the interest in the stadium as in the building, in the venue itself. And I think that does make it a challenging sell, and it means we're looking for a partner who wants specifically that interest, whereas in other situations they may be more able to combine the rights, and that might be something that we'll be looking at whether we can move into a better position in time.
Okay. Any more questions?
Yeah, a couple of things. First of all, about the retainer, you're paying them a retainer, but I thought you said a few minutes ago.
Sorry, we're not paying them a retainer anymore.
You're not paying
that contract.
Right, that's answered that question.
When we appointed them, there was a retainer element for a time period, and there was a success fee if they were successfully in bringing a sponsor. The retainer expired a long. It's sufficiently long ago. That's why neither Jerry or I can remember the amount, but we're not paying it anymore.
Right. So when did you stop looking for a sponsor? If I can say, in effect, the terms around the ESP appointment, the retainer, and the period that was paid for, that's the information we said we'll come back with, and we can answer that question as part of that same answer. Just for clarity, you're saying now that at the moment you're not actively looking for someone to do the naming rights.
We're not actively marketing through an agency like ESP in the way we were previously, because we think it's better to resolve some of the decisions that need and issues that are being addressed, and so we've got a cleaner offer, I suppose, to the market, and we've got a very clear proposition.
So, when did you take that decision to stop marketing?
I think that's the question you just asked me about, which I think I need to effectively when the ESP contract was allowed to sort of lapse and we stopped actively marketing, we decided not to renew and to keep going back into the market. We didn't re-engage them or anyone else, and in that sense, that was the point.
Yeah,
I need to come back and clarify for you exactly when that was.
I'm not asking for a specific date, just an indication. So if I can help you, was that this year or last year?
So I'm pretty sure it was spring of this calendar year.
Pardon?
I'm pretty sure, but I will confirm it was in the springtime of this calendar year, before the summer, but it was into 2017.
That helps me, thank you.
And I've read that one of the major problems, and I think you've touched on it, is around the fact that you're not working with West Ham on the naming rights. And I think you should explore doing a deal with West Ham, because clearly, if you look at Arsenal, for instance, you've got the Emirates Stadium, but of course they are emblazoned with Emirates on their shirts. And of course I would have thought, he says tongue-in-cheek, any team that had, any sponsor that had the naming rights of the stadium would want to also be associated with the success of the football club that are the main...
So, I think I didn't say we weren't working with West Ham, and certainly in this area, on the previous marketing exercises, we have worked with them in promoting the stadium and trying to attract sponsors in. And you'll know, because it's a public document, the concession agreement anticipates West Ham benefiting from a naming rights agreement that we might reach, and therefore we always...
Can I just push on? No, can I just push you on that? Because I understand that deal. I've seen that deal, whereby if you get a sponsor, then West Ham get a kickback on that deal. But that's not actually...
No, I understand. I understand what you're saying.
A mutual agreement with West Ham, where West Ham actually agreed to take some of the, to have the marketing on their own.
The distinction I was trying to make. So I think you said that I had said we weren't working with West Ham.
No,
and I want to be clear that when we were actively in the market and there were actively interested potential partners, West Ham worked with us on that, or we worked together on it, and they were part of occasions when people came to the stadium, we were shown around, and we did work together. And we need to do that because they do have, as you say, that interest in the contract provisions that provide them with an interest in a deal over a certain threshold. But you are also right, as I was saying earlier, that that's different to offering a combined deal for shirts and stadia, and that isn't where we've been so far. West Ham have done their own deals for shirts, which have been on different time periods and predated. Obviously, they had those long before they'd moved to the stadium. And different time periods. And so far we have done the exercises separately. I think it's an interesting question, and something that I think is something we can definitely be looking at for the future. And I suppose I was alluding to when I said that there's some lost value through the different interests in the rights that we might be able to address if we did explore it in the way you describe. It does have different challenges, and I wouldn't want you to think it was as simple as it would be in the example of Arsenal and Manchester City, for example, where they do have one sponsor who are supporting the team and the stadium. They would be different arrangements, but I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying in terms of the potential value there.
Thank you.
Okay, Chair, if I can we look at two sites specifically now, Cultural and Education District. The figures are moving, both in recovering capital income as well as on the budgets. But let's begin in setting the scene. So we've got, I take it the Education District, if I can refer to it as that, on your site, I think you call it, I don't know what you call it. I know on the cultural quarter we've got the Stratford
two sites.
Fund. It's two sites.
There's two sites, one of which will have a University College London campus solely, and that's the site just to the south. It's the South Lawn, where we used extensively this summer for the athletics. It's been an event venue so far just to the south of the orbit, but that will solely be a UCL university campus. Tremendously important, I should say, in terms of the economic benefit for the area, in terms of bringing one of the great universities of the world to the area. The site, the Stratford Waterfront site opposite the Aquatics, currently vacant, is where we would be housing the both cultural and educational partners, so University of the Arts London as well as the the other partners.
Because I'm quite excited by this project.
So
I want you to dispel the issues of downsizing to me and the movement of these figures. So we're not moving from let me give you an analogy, a great Tesco superstore to a Tesco Express cultural experience, right, in terms of on that waterfront site.
I can absolutely reassure you about that.
In doing so, explain then the working relationship with key partners particularly around the cultural district. How's it working? Who's doing what? Where's the contributions coming from? And we really are walking the extra mile to get this up to be a significant cultural quarter.
Okay. A number of questions in there, so I'll do my best to pick them all up. So we definitely haven't, it's not been downgraded in any sense to any analogy around smaller supermarkets that you might want to use. The aspiration is absolutely unchanged. The ambition, as we set it out, is absolutely unchanged. We have had to remodel the master plan on the Stratford waterfront site for specific reasons arising out of what was the emerging direction of what's going to come through in the future London plan around the strategic views management framework and protecting the view of St Paul's, which we were at danger of impacting through the tall towers we had on the scheme. So we reached a point where common sense said to ourselves we should stop pursuing this route because it was going to come into significant planning issues, and that has caused delay, and it's caused us to effectively go back and remodel the configuration of that site so that the residential accommodation will be in a greater number of lower rise blocks but taking a greater footprint of the site, and we're reconfiguring how the culture and education partners are then reconfigured on the rest of that site. So no change in ambition at all. A planning issue that's meant we had to remodel. I mean, coincidentally that it's today, but actually the consultation on the remaster planning has been, I think it was actually launched last night. It's available and start local consultation events today. And that has reconfigured that site in a way that we think now addresses those planning concerns. And to go to your subsequent questions, we've been working really closely with all of the partners involved. So I suppose our role, obviously we are the landowner. We have developed the project and we lead the delivery of the project, but obviously these are great and independent institutions in their own right, and we can't do anything without taking it all by consensus and taking everyone forward in a way that everybody is happy with, albeit everyone understands we need to work together and the whole needs to fit together in a way that works. So we sort of hold the ring, I think, in what are collective discussions to come up with, and we have a design team, master plan team, Allies and Morrison, who were appointed a while ago for the original master plan. They've redone the new one. They work with all the partners. We coordinate all that activity to come to a consensus of how this can all work together. So I think you said very excited. I think we remain enormously excited about this. I think we've had two important milestones recently. So at the conference that was jointly sponsored with Here East and the International Quarter and the Evening Standard about 10 days ago, the Mayor very forcefully and publicly committed his support to the scheme and how positive he is about this project. And we had confirmation from the government in the last few days that the revised plans are getting the business case approved, effectively updating the original approval we'd had on the previous plans. So those both help build that confidence. We've launched the planning consultation, as I said, today, and we're going forward now very positively. And I think we're back sort of in delivery mode for that whole scheme. The UCL side of it wasn't affected by those problems. The planning application was submitted in May and is due to be determined in December. The agreements are going through our and their approvals, and we feel very positive that that's moving in the right direction as well. So I think you can be reassured those ambitions that are, really are fundamental to, I suppose, the addition of this great economic benefit of bringing these cultural and educational partners to the area is on track and is re-kicking off, having had the hiatus of the delay I referred to.
And as part of that, I suppose this question to Jerry, is part of that, are you looking for more, I can't even say it, philanthropic supporters to to invest in those schemes, or is that being done by the other partners? What's the role of the LDDC in that, of trying to get some more funding up front to enable, I think, some of the, we'll get to talk about the figures in the future. What can you shine a light on that for me?
There is hopefully going to be a philanthropic element to the future plan. So LLDC helped constitute an independent charity, the Foundation for Future London, and I have to declare an interest. I'm a trustee on the Foundation for Future London's board. But while it's very difficult to fundraise, while the kind of the structure and the master planning was being rescoped, so there has, I would acknowledge, been a hiatus in the fundraising, but I think I can say that the charity is regrouping now with the partners and with the project and developing plans for a fundraising ambition with the partners. So that charity will work with the partners. It will be independent, but it is, I expect to see a sort of a fundraising strategy arising now out of a reconfigured master plan, working with the partners.
And of course, we'd expect the GLA to be part of that, and government to support that as well in its way.
Yeah, I think you were touching on in your questions at the start about different contributions and where, and it's always been the case and remains the case that I suppose we're sort of managing a cocktail of funding to make this project work. As you say, the government committed to support it originally some 3 years ago, and as I say, that's being reconfirmed now. There is significant support through the GLA and the Mayor of London, through our budget process and through the recycling of residential receipts that will come out of the scheme. The universities are both bringing significant funding contributions themselves and are major contributors to the totality. So the residential is part of the scheme to generate receipts, and then, as Jerry was just alluding to, there's the philanthropic element. So aggregating that funding, which sort of we're doing, but actually all, of course, goes through our GLA budget process, it's all part of our flow of funds through the business, it remains that sort of package of funding, as I think we've talked about in these meetings previously.
And on the figures of, so you're now forecasting 2017-18 that you're going to spend 9.5 million more than budgeted on capital cost. Was all to do with that work on that specific site and the difficulties we were facing. Yeah. And then on the issue of a further figure about, I think it was on capital income of 14.1 that you're suggesting you're going to get less of. That's the less figure, isn't it?
Yeah, so the
now, is that contributions by other partners? How does that, or what? How does that work? Explain to me.
So just in the budget that we presented last year, it wasn't clear at the time. The issues actually weren't clear at the time, much less the resolution. So last year's budget figures are very much based on previous assumptions. There was an assumption about philanthropic funding in there, and that I've explained about the hiatus. So actually we will be working hard to try and ensure that the budget figures that we submit now in November to the GLA will reflect the new scheme to the extent that we're clear about how that's going to pan out.
Okay. And so when do we start locking some of these partners in now, or are they locked in? So is the V&A locked in? So the V&A is working with the Smithsonian.
Yeah.
Are they locked in? It's early, or is it we're still too early in that praise? So we're all committed, principle of working together. When do we start saying, well, actually, this is what it means for you, and this is where it is?
So we have we have an agreement for lease with UCL, and we're actually working with them on updating some of that. We have advanced discussions with the University of Arts London, with Sadler's Wells and with the V&A, and we would hope, and government would hope, that we'll be closing out those agreements for lease by the end of the year. There will be some conditional elements of those agreements for lease, but if you want to, if you want to feel that you're locked in, an agreement for lease is kind of That's the business to make you feel more comfortable. So by the end of the year is our target.
It is an important point, though. So an agreement for lease by its nature, it's an agreement. It's conditional on things before a lease becomes an actual lease becomes operational, and things like planning permission, which we haven't got today for the site, and securing all that package of funding certain enough for people to let, or for us to let construction contracts. Those are things that will be progressed. But I suppose it's worth saying, everybody is working fully on the basis they're in the scheme, fully committed, working together. Again, I mentioned the conference just recently. All the partners were there supporting that event. And I think all the behaviour and all the intent is that those partners will all be part of the scheme. We've got some, as you go through these big projects, there are hurdles you go through where things become incrementally more certain. We will, as Jerry said, I think getting the agreements for lease signed is an important next milestone. But we will be going through planning, we'll be going through a final business case process with government, and out of all that it gets absolute certainty.
I think so. I would add, from my perspective, that all the partners have put huge amounts of effort into this. Yeah. They're not doing this without the active support of their governing bodies, right. And so clearly, until things are formally signed and sealed, they're never signed. And, it's like it's a bit like exchanging on a house, isn't it? You're absolutely desperate to do it, but until the signatures are put on the document, it's not there. And so we're going through that process at the moment. But I attended that conference. I spoke to most, if not all, of the partners then, and I'd spoken to them previously as we've worked with them through the challenges that have been talked about, and they are all very excited about this. They have all put in very significant efforts to get the plans to the level they are and how exciting they are. And so, with the support of the government, which is an important part of the finances, with the support of the mayor, which is again a very significant part of the finances, and with their own individual approaches, and absolutely, we fully believe that this is going to happen.
Yes, that's a nod.
Absolutely, that's a nod. No, I think David was just reinforcing what I'd already said. No, sorry, if you wanted me to confirm, I absolutely confirm that is all the case. We're working together very well, very positively, and everybody is, I think, really excited actually about the new scheme and the new design, and in many respects it's at least as positive as before. But we have had a delay, as we acknowledge, but we're now going forward. And I think today is an important day. The fact we've now been able to go public with a new master plan for the waterfront site shows we've come through that hiatus period Jerry and I referred to.
I think we're right to ask the tough questions, and there are some tough questions around the stadium and other issues, but we shouldn't lose sight. This has been a great quarter for London, and some of the work, going over there, I go over there different, not just in terms of using the venue for football or others, and there have been great experiences about that. The athletics one that I think we shared, and rightly so, in terms of managing that. But I'm always amazed by the number of people that use the park, and that, you think of other ex-Olympic locations that are desolate, underused, not there. So I really, like to see this take off, and you seem to be getting there. So back to you, Jerry. So thinking about what the up-and-coming budget process is, what challenges in the forecast, and I think you alluded to it earlier on, what will, what in terms of forecasting, what's going to happen on these particular projects? Seems the University Education District is there, it's happening. This one, even though we've reached these milestones, is the interesting one on budgeting. So what's going to happen?
I think we've already discussed the stadium at length, and that that will be the most challenging, and not. Not because we do have a much better understanding now of the costs of running the venue and the sort of income that we can attract, but it's overlaying onto that the activities that we're currently engaged in reducing costs. So it's the balance of cost and cost reductions that is going to be probably the big challenge. I think one of the other areas that, and I think we discussed this the last time I was here, was about the forecasting of receipts for residential development, and that isn't particularly in our hands, and that sort of overlaying a degree of overlaying our experience of some slippage in those receipts is going to also be, you know, I don't want to be too prudent, but at the same time, I don't want to keep coming back and telling you why we haven't hit the target on receipts. But there has been some difficulties in sort of in getting there has been some delays in getting the receipts in, but we are seeing now significant receipts coming in, maybe not in the June, but you will see it in the next quarter report. But it ties in as well with our revenue income, because the more people who live and work on the park, the more revenue we get through our fixed estate charge. So there's a tie-in between capital receipts and our revenue position. So they're the things that are tricky for the budget.
Can I just add a bit? Is that okay? I mean, just you alluded to how busy the park is when you visit, and I actually just checked before we came over, and we've passed 18 million visitors in the park in the 3.5 years since it reopened, which I think a lot of that is people using the venues, and you know, those the venue usage is again one of those areas which has a significant impact, particularly on the revenue budget. But you know, we can only influence so much. We can't directly control in the way Jerry said, but has gone really, really well. We've passed 3 million people using the aquatic centre alone, and again, still with many thousands of local school kids and children learning to swim there, and all those uses you know about. So I think, you know, the venues budgets we've you know, but I think a really great story, and it's going well, but it's difficult to anticipate. And as Jerry said, a lot of the other activity we are dependent on either developers or tenants who we've got occupying spaces, but we have an interest in how they perform. And so, I mean, you know, Here East is a tenant of ours. They bring in the individual occupiers into that facility. They've, you know, a number of announcements recently of really good new partners. You know, Ford committing to move in there with some research capability, really exciting. UCL have just opened both the Bartlett School of Architecture and Real Estate team there, and a lot of the high-tech engineering. But we're sort of dependent on those agreements. We're, if you like, a level removed, and that does affect all our budgeting. But as you said, there's the activity in terms of usage of the park and the venues, the activity in terms of new employers coming in, and what that does in terms of the new the jobs and the economic benefit is going fantastically well, and we are absolutely delighted.
Assemblymember Pigeon.
2 quick questions. In 2014, the Chancellor had promised 141 million for Olympicopolis. Is that still in the mix?
Yes.
That's still committed?
So we don't use that title anymore.
I know you don't. That's right. I know you don't, but I just wanted to check
it's a
it
marvellous
was still. Yeah, but it's still in there for this new quarter. Yeah.
Yes. So what the exercise I was just referring to a bit earlier was that was on the basis of an original business case then, which was on a different configuration, and we effectively have been going back, getting that reconfirmed recently.
Okay. And then your forecast for the year is 27.8 million of capital expenditure in this area. What is that money spent on? What are you, this year? What? I understand you're going through master planning, whatever, and that will cost a chunk of money, but that can't be the 27.8 million. What's that money been spent on?
That is largely in this, and actually I should say that the forecasts will be revisited in the next quarter, and I anticipate seeing a substantial reduction in that forecast. But the main costs at the moment are the costs of master planning, the costs of preparing for planning, the costs of all of the legal costs. Included in that mix, which will, I think, come out, were some early infrastructure works. So I think you'll see a reduction in that forecast going forward. in the next quarter.
It's not useful
Because
to get a breakdown because it feels, I mean, obviously,
Yeah.
consultants I appreciate and lawyers cost a lot, but when you look at that and think that's approaching 30 million,
This
Feels
is
a
yeah.
lot.
So I think that's not a problem. As I said, some of the anticipated infrastructure works
Yeah.
won't be happening. But the master planning work is a significant piece of work.
It's worth bearing in mind the
It-
scale of what
it's
we're
a
doing
huge-
here, though. You know, the
it's a huge
waterfront
piece of
site is bigger than the Pompidou Centre. You know, it's significantly bigger just in terms of the cultural and education part, as well as the residential. And then we're delivering a new university for, you know, effectively a whole new campus for UCL. So it is very significant master planning. We need environmental impact assessment, transport impacts, all those things to contribute to the planning process. So there is a lot of work going on, but as Jerry said, we can provide that breakdown.
Really helpful, thank you.
Yes, we'll write to you in the usual way afterwards and ask
Of
for
course.
that as well as other things. I'm going to move on and talk about affordable housing now, and Jeanette Arnold, Assemblymember Arnold, is going to lead on that for us.
Well, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, all. My first question is to David Goldstone. David, I want to refer you to your corporate performance April to June 2017 Q1 2017 document, page 12, and the top box there. I see that you have identified key risks and issues. And I'll just read the summary that you put in. You said that there are challenges to the ability of LLDC to return expected receipts from housing developments and repay borrowing. You then go on the impact on the LLDC, significant financial and reputational impact. And then you set out as mitigation, consider alternative deal structure to support generation of receipts, close working with GLA, including on affordable housing, management focus on housing development. So my question is what is higher priority for the LLDC, generating enough capital receipts or meeting affordable housing targets that Londoners are desperately in need of?
So I think we're looking at our future housing programme. The text you referred to reflects a need to balance priorities that we want to meet all of as much as we possibly can. You'll know, you know, as a public body, as a local authority, we need a long-term financial plan that does repay our borrowings to the GLA. So effectively all our capital expenditure is funded through loans from the GLA, and we have to be able to show, to meet the prudential borrowing requirements, that we can repay that borrowing. Obviously, the Mayor has made very clear the very high priority there is on maximising the volume of housing, and particularly the volume of affordable housing, and to do so as quickly as possible. And so we have been looking at, and what the text alludes to, is work we've been doing since the Mayor came into post last year, or indeed obviously we'd started looking at it in anticipation of that, to say how can we accelerate the delivery of affordable housing, how can we maximise it, and how can we make sure we do so in such a way that our financial plans are still sustainable and we repay our borrowings. And that is, I suppose, compelling us to maybe look at our housing delivery in more innovative ways and in different models than we have for the two schemes that we've already got under contract with housing developers. So, for example, the type of thing we're looking at is that we might explore joint venture arrangements. That would be a different arrangement that might give us a higher stake, but might also, it puts you in a different risk position, but potentially a higher share of the returns, the receipts that come out of housing development, and enable us to deliver both more affordable housing and maintain the financial position. So the two sites, and I'm talking about sites in Pudding Mill and sites off Stratford High Street and Vic Roberts Way, future sites, are ones where we've been exploring how they were previously planned to be later on in our programme, a number of years away. And because of the priority, as you say, to deliver more affordable housing more quickly, we're looking at, can we bring them forward? Can we deliver more affordable housing in recognition of the Mayor's policies, but do so in such a way that's financially sustainable?
Can I just go over to David Bellamy and come back to you about numbers? David, members have noted that the LLDC's aim that a third of homes are affordable falls short of the Mayor's long-term goal that 50% of all homes built in London should be affordable. So when it says here, in terms of close working with the GLA, including on affordable housing, can we understand whether the Mayor is pushing the LLDC, despite its issues, to meet its target, and in fact not just meet its target, but go beyond its target? Is that the position that the GLA has when it talks about close working with the GLA?
Absolutely. We've had a number of sessions between both at kind of advisor level and also at officer level between LLDC and the GLA housing and land teams to look at how we can do this. And as David said, you know, we're looking at different approaches, considering all options to try and, you know, rather than, I think it's fair to say that the plans under the previous administration were based around an idea of, well, we'll hold on to the land, we'll develop it at some point reasonably distant in the future, house prices will carry on going through the roof, and therefore the sums add up. Yeah. That isn't an approach, in the view of the Mayor, that meets the need of Londoners, and so we're having to work harder to find a way of doing that. We haven't concluded all that work, but there's some very promising approaches that have been identified, and we do think that we have got a way of getting there. Yeah. And we're continuing to work on that, and I guess get those plans to a point where we can include them in the LLDC long-term financial plans, which feed into this next budget round.
Okay.
Can I just add one other point?
Can I just speak to David if he'll look at me? From what you said, looking at David, am I to take it that the Mayor has no intentions of taking the lever off the LLDCs and its commitment to deliver the affordable housing that has been agreed?
Yeah, we're absolutely committed to, on those two sites, which are the two sites that are yet to contract and go through the process of doing all we can to deliver as much affordable housing as possible, and we're absolutely looking to deliver 50% there. And everybody's efforts are focused on doing that. As I say, we've made some good progress. We haven't bottomed out everything yet, but we are working through it well.
So they are expected to meet the new target, the new long-term goal of 50% of their developments. David, can I just carry on questioning so that I can just stay with my flow and get on record? How many homes are you now expecting to deliver at each of the development sites at the Olympic Park, and what proportion at each site will be affordable?
There's 5, the point I was going to make a moment ago, but I'll make now. So we are working with, the other constraint I suppose we have is we are working within an existing planning permission for the all our sites. The Legacy Communities Scheme, which was given planning permission in 2012, does set a planning, outline planning baseline, I suppose, an assumption for all of the sites. And so as we look again at the plans, we have to look at how we can amend that. Within the constraints of that existing planning permission, which was about building long-term sustainable neighbourhoods in the area. So, for example, the very high concentration on family homes, as well as the affordable targets. So, in the 5 sites that are within the LCS, Chobham Manor is under contract, is making phase 1 of that is nearing completion. We are still aiming at the contracted, it's around 850 homes. Just under 30% affordable is what was contracted when that contract was signed in, I think, late 2012. So that's been in contract for a while. There is a focus there, as I said, particularly in that project on the high level of family homes, but that is the already contracted affordable position. And almost all of the phase 1 homes, around up to 180, are being occupied now. The second and third, or the second project contractually is Eastwick and Sweetwater, which again we signed contracts before the mayor election, and therefore is contracted under the previous policy. It's about 1,500 homes, and broadly split a third between affordable, private rented and private for sale. So give or take 500 in each category. And that we expect to start on site early in the new year. We're just working through some final issues with the contractor on that. Stratford Waterfront is different because it is having originally been planned as a housing site, it is now effectively providing the residential component that's contributing to the costs of and the funding of the culture and education district in the way we touched on earlier. And therefore, to maximise the receipts for that and to help make that scheme fully funded, we are developing that scheme on the assumption that it will be all private sales, so it won't have affordable housing, because in effect the value the affordable housing would otherwise take is being factored into the delivery of the culture and cultural partners and the universities, because at national government, at mayor and city hall level and all the local boroughs have all agreed the greatest benefit is through bringing the economic benefits of those universities and cultural partners to the park, rather than continuing a number of years ago's plan where that would have all been housing.
So let me get this right. So let me just get this right. At the Sweetwater development, there will be no affordable homes.
At the Stratford Waterfront development, the current plans, which haven't gone through planning yet, is the master plan we've just been discussing a bit earlier, that's at the first stage of development, but is currently being taken forward on the assumption that that one site won't have any affordable housing because it is supporting the investment in the culture and education district. Eastwick and Sweetwater is a third affordable.
Oh, right. So Eastwick and Sweetwater is a third affordable. Yeah, okay.
And Stratford Waterfront is the one without.
And Stratford Waterfront. So if I say that you've taken off affordable homes out of Stratford Waterfront, have you put those units back in, and where have you put them?
So that's what I'm coming on to. So there's then two further sites that are the ones we've been referring to as where we're working on how can we deliver more affordable and more quickly, which are Pudding Mill and Rick Roberts Way, both of which, to actually probably answer your question, is work in progress at the moment, because we're looking at, I mean, for example, on Rick Roberts Way, recently concluded we had a capacity study jointly with London Borough of Newham, who jointly own the site, to say actually how can we optimise the units on this site, and in the context of meeting the affordable policies and the financial parameters we discussed. So we've been looking, we think actually we can get significantly more units on that site and more on Pudding Mill Lane than are in the current planning application. But that is what we're currently working through to finalise the strategy. So a lot of the units of affordable housing that, if you like, are being lost on Stratford Waterfront, we will be able to replace and compensate through provision on Pudding Mill or Rick Roberts Way within our area.
Will that compromise the design standards? Because where will you find this? Where will you find this emptiness from?
It's not emptiness. It's in the sense that we're doing the plans hadn't really been developed previously for those sites. There'd been some very outline estimates of what they might deliver. We've now commissioned much more detailed work on capacity, on sort of master planning, actually a configuration on that site with an objective, for all the reasons you alluded to at the start, of trying to deliver as many affordable homes as we can. And so so what I think I've carefully not said, for the avoidance of doubt, is we're not fully replacing every unit that would have been on Stratford Waterfront, but we're going a significant way towards, and we are delivering more units and more affordable units than we would have originally.
Okay. Did you talk about the Rick
That's for
Roberts?
Pudding Mill Lane and Rick Roberts Way.
Okay, so what you've said applies to that as well.
Yeah.
So in summary then, you're saying that the contracts that were put out under the previous mayor, then that the agreement there in terms of affordability stand.
Correct.
But all new contracts, as I understand it from Mr. Bellamy, will meet this mayor's long-term goal of 50% of affordable homes.
Exactly what we're working to achieve. Yeah.
That's what we're working to
Very
achieve.
good progress on.
Yeah. So I think that gives me the answers to my questions, Chair.
Okay. I've seen Assemblymember Prince.
No, I think my question's been answered. Thank you.
Spectacular. In which case we're going to move on and talk about governance, and Assemblymember Pigeon is leading on
Could I
that.
just pick up with David and Jerry just on the housing? With the work you're doing with developers in all their viability stuff, does that still assume that developers make a 20% profit, which seems to be the baseline for all these viability assessments? And are you trying to squeeze that down?
I think broadly, yes, we are assuming a 20% profit in our modelling. I think we've taken the view that in order to engage with the market, we have to be realistic about the market expectations. However, the one thing I would say is in that looking at different models for how we can deliver the housing, so David mentioned joint ventures, there is an opportunity for us to put more equity into those ventures and reduce the requirement for equity from developers. So although there's still a headline 20%, actually if you did a calculation of the totality, the developer's profit would be around 20%, but it would be of a smaller equity.
And the point is we would share the same benefit and be able to reinvest it into, and I mean that's actually the benefit of it. We would then reinvest it into our programme to deliver the greater units and the more affordable units we refer to. So we would share in that upside.
I'd have to check on the exact number, but ballpark it's around the 20%.
20%, which I just think is astonishing. That where else do you assume that you'll always make a 20% profit?
Can we just distinguish? I mean, so there's as Jerry said, modelling assumption. Obviously, you then go to the market and you compete and you procure and you try and negotiate the best possible deal. So it doesn't mean we end up there.
No,
it means in modelling what we think is going to be an outcome, that's a market assumption.
Yeah, okay, okay, it's just a bugbear of mine. Governance, let's move on to that. So to Chief of Staff, what's your day-to-day involvement with the running of the LLDC?
Obviously, the running of the LLDC is invested in the executive team who are accountable up to their board. It's fair to say we meet periodically in terms of senior LLDC officers, senior GLA officers to discuss what's going on and ensuring that the two organisations are joined up. Beyond that, I speak periodically to the chair, as you would expect. And if there are particular issues that we're working through, whether that's with the stadium or the CED or affordable housing as we just talked about, then I'll have direct contact with David or Jerry or members of the executive team.
Okay, but the last year we hadn't had a chair. So had you had to be a bit more involved because of that? We had a gap from November until June, I think, in terms of... David resigned in May... David Edmonds resigned in May 2016. No, he didn't. He resigned in November 16. Oh, right, okay. So you may be thinking of Ed Lister at OPDC. Maybe. And I've been going...
First of November or...
Yeah, and so I did work with David when he was in post. It's probably fair to say that, there are a couple of big issues that we've been talking about today, and it's fair to say probably through the winter into the spring, we were probably talking quite a lot about those issues to try and work through them. And so we did have that level of contact. But of course, Philip Lewis, as deputy chair of the board, was acting chair, and so he very much took the lead on the governance side of things and the kind of, I guess, line management of David.
Okay. And then one of the strange things I've found about the whole setup is you've got E20, and E20's got its own board, 3 LLDC members, 3 Newham members. The 3 LLDC members also sit on the main LLDC board. Do you not think that looks rather conflicted and odd from an outside perspective?
It's the arrangement that was put in place by the previous administration, and so we are where we are. It's 3 LLDC members and 2 Newham members, reflecting the partnership shares. it probably does make sense that it's the 3 LLDC members are drawn from the LLDC board to try and, you know, minimise duplication and confusion. But yeah, that's just the, you know, the arrangement as it stands.
Do you think you might make some changes to that?
I think it's fair to say, per the conversation earlier, that we have a number of issues about how the stadium, everything is structured. Moss Stevens clearly, you know, are going to conclude whatever they conclude about that. We're working constructively with colleagues at Newham to try and, you know, plot the right way forward for the stadium, and, you know, we'll discuss anything and everything with them.
Okay. So E20 is part of that discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. To David Goldston. So housing you've just been talking about is one of your big aspects, big things for the Olympic Park. That's right. But on your board, you've got representatives from sports industry, retail, leisure, arts, local politicians. Who is there pushing the case for affordable housing?
Apart from anything else, we have the leaders of the 4 boroughs, who obviously have a very major interest in that. So we have the mayors of 3 mayors and the leader of Waltham Forest. So they are very strong voices, obviously, in terms of the provision of housing for local people. And of course, actually, the mayor's the deputy mayor for regeneration and planning, Jules Pipe, is a member of our board. So we have 5.
Right.
Jules is a member of the board, appointed by the mayor. So we have 5 either London or local borough representatives on the board, all of whom I think you can rest assured have that interest at heart. I think there are also, I think there are members of the board, as you say, with particular specialisms, but I don't think that means they're not also immune to, you know, which way the local and London-wide and national political interest is blowing, and that, you know, those points are brought to bear by other members of the board. They don't confine themselves to their area of specialism. They are corporate board members.
That's happened. I hadn't realised Jules is on there, so that gives
Jules has been a member of the board since exactly when he was appointed deputy mayor.
Okay, and then to Martin, in terms of risk, how are you able to manage the risks surrounding E20 when it's kind of 2 steps removed from the GLA? And I think this was something that was picked up in your annual governance statement, that you are exposed to financial risk due to overspends on and reduced income from existing LLDC projects, requirement to underwrite risks and provide cash flow support.
Well, several levels. Fundamental way of managing it is making sure that all the costs, etc., are very closely, are properly reflected in the LLDC budget submissions, budgets and capital spending plans. That agree, and so you can say are well cited and can understand the issues. I have monthly meetings with Jerry and our finance team. David often join us on that, so there is that ongoing engagement, and in between that, Jerry's very good at keeping me abreast of issues, and I would say we have a very good close working relationship. We've got a shared responsibility for managing those risks. Jerry, you could say, as the CFO for the LLDC, mine with the wider sort of GLA group finance responsibilities. I can say this is one area, though, sort of, you could say the internal GLA governance oversight is currently being having a regular MOPAC internal audit, and that will be concluding and will be reporting to the next meeting of the audit panel, not the one that was yesterday, so the one in December. So something we're keeping under review. And then there's things, not just E20, but major projects. Take the CED. I'm a member of the programme board. I am there at these, probably I call 6 weekly sort of finance and policy liaison meetings, with David Bellamy and the senior team, you know, so it sounds a bit weak, but being really closely involved.
In terms of your risk register,
Yeah.
is pretty much everything to do with LLDC red?
It is certainly
Financially.
the highest in finances. That it's at the high end of our risk register. It probably is the top risk at the moment, and that's because I think there's so much work in progress. And we've had the discussions on delivering affordable housing and what that means. So those things need to work through. I don't rule out, but it's not an immediate thing, is whether GLA might need to strengthen its balance sheet to manage some of those risks. But at the stage, it's not a contract being let on the CED yet, for example. But so it's a high alert anyway. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
In the interest of transparency, is it possible to disaggregate the E20 costs and income from the LLDC budget?
What goes in the LLDC budget is the LLDC's contribution to E20.
Right, but that's not the E20, that's not their budget in total, is it? It wouldn't be their financial statement in total.
It wouldn't be E20s.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because it's the LLDC contribution funding into E20, and Newham, through Newham Legacy Investments, account for Newham's funding contribution into E20. So E20's total is the combination of the two.
So
But
E20,
E20 produces its own accounts, so that which obviously aggregates, and they
Yeah.
will be available.
and that would declare the LLDC contribution within their own accounts?
Source of funding. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
So that will show the aggregate of all the funding into E20 and
Yeah.
and all the all the
Because
accounts
I mean,
information.
we haven't seen E20's accounts. Are they available at Companies House? Is that where we would find them?
They are the last set of accounts filed at Companies House with the 15-16 accounts. The deadline for filing the 16-17 accounts is the end of December. We
Right.
anticipate filing by the end of December.
Okay, we'll pick them up there.
I'll probably just add another helpful bit, if you could say, governance oversight, is we've got it's the same external audit firm that audits E20, LLDC and GLA, and Assembly Member Keith Prince was the audit panel. If you get any reports from our external auditor on the GLA finance and accounts, it is LLDC things which are highlighted, probably as much as anything. But that is very useful, having the same auditor across, in a way, that part of the group.
For obvious reasons. Okay.
Yeah.
Internal audit as well.
Pardon?
Well, the same internal audit as well.
So, yeah, in fact, sorry,
So
same
the
internal
MOPAC
audit.
internal audit is a shared service
Yes.
as well.
So,
Okay. Well, that neatly leads us on to financial sustainability, and Jeanette Arnold is going to be leading on that for us.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair. Question to David Goldstone. David, let's just set the scene here. The core function of the LLDC after the 2012 Olympic and Paralympic Games was to create a viable future for the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park. The question is, did the LLDC get nearer or further away from self-sustainability in the last year?
Can I just challenge the premise of that question? I don't think that was the only objective. I think the objective, the mission, the vision, was about delivering the regeneration benefits that were promised, and which are captured in phrases such as transforming the lives of local people through the investment that have been delivered for the games. So a lot of what we do is around, for example, bringing in new employers, which don't necessarily directly financially benefit us, but deliver enormous economic benefit to local people. So there is absolutely a financial sustainability objective, and I will answer your question, but it's not the only one. We've obviously got a core mission around that benefit. Jerry has got the numbers closer to hand, but I think we got closer, actually. I think in terms of the answer to your question, we've always said that the trend towards financial sustainability was going to be a long term, as we incrementally and have continued, I think, to reduce cost and increase income and close the gap between them, and reduce the dependence we have on support from the GLA, and we have done in the last year.
We have, I think, in our last budget presentation, We highlighted funding gaps in 1819 and 1920, and we've made a fair degree of progress in closing out. Certainly for 1819, we're fairly confident that we will address that funding gap fully, and we've also gone some way to address the funding gap in 1920. I think in terms of, as I mentioned before, in terms of ensuring the park's financial sustainability, that will be a mix of reducing the costs and increasing the income on venues, but also in the raising of the fixed estate charge, and that we are very much dependent on new developments coming online, and as we've explained, there can be delays in some of those developments. They're not, once we contract out, like Chobham and Eastwick and Sweetwater, it's not entirely in our gift to manage the timeline of those developments. But as people live there, and particularly as the Culture and Education District comes online, we will be collecting a fixed estate charge. We've already started to collect the fixed estate charge, so Here East contribute around £1 million of fixed estate charge. So that's kind of quite a substantial chunk of money, but that grows to, and I would have to check the timing, but between sort of 10, 11 million pounds of income to the park, which is a substantial long-term benefit, but it's going to take a long term to get up to maximum.
And the agreement for lease with UCL reflects them paying the fixed estate charge. The Chobham Manor tenants, residents are paying fixed estate charge.
If we talk numbers, from my understanding, you currently, you're due to use up your last remaining 6.3 million of reserves. Then next year, when there is no reserve to release, you will be showing a 4.6 million funding gap. Really, doesn't that lead us as members to say that your financial sustainability is in severe doubt?
So absolutely, that was the position that we presented at last year's budget. I think there are two things. We rely on our funding from the GLA, and we took a decision that the LLDC wasn't required to hold its own reserves, given that our ultimate funder is the GLA. We have been managing that short-term funding exposure, and while we had a 4.6 million gap in 1819 at last year's budget, we believe that through increased income, some of which is one-off, and reduction in costs, particularly on venues like the aquatics. We've done a lot of work on reducing the cost of the aquatics, that we have closed that gap. So we don't expect to present a budget in 1819 that has a funding gap.
It seems to me it's all really convenient, isn't it, your relationship with the GLA? Because it's where would you find an organisation that can suddenly shift its empty resource pot to a parent government, to a parent organisation? It's
well, we are in effect a subsidiary. I mean, we are a part of the GLA group, and we're not a completely independent.
You're expected to meet a sort of business plan as set out. So let me put it to you, that you're. Let me get on now to your loan facility with the LDA, and let me just come over to Martin then, because it seems to me that the GLA as parent company is just, treats you guys like spoilt children.
Doesn't feel like that.
It's like I treat my granddaughter. She leaves the house with £10 and she spends 20. And is still in need of more. The LLDC has this revolving loan facility with the GLA that is already struggling to pay. So when we look at the accounts for 2015-16, it said that the LLDC was planning to pay back 54.6 million. A year later, this repayment has been put off for another year. And now the LLD is looking to borrow 78.2 million. Instead of paying, it goes back. What sort of parent are you?
Well, you're a parent who's got a child that was not given any resource, and and they are in effect a delivery arm for the mayor in these areas, and if the mayor wants things to happen, he's got to fund it. Jerry can explain the movement in the capital receipt repayment not happening, but it is all tied down to the phasing of the capital developments compared to plan. But at the end of the day, there's a bit of a technical answer. We are subject to the local government finance regime and all the various acts and codes that's round that. So yes, the GLA is lending money to the LLDC, which it pays from capital receipts, but we can only lend if we're satisfied that they will have the wherewithal, the means to repay, and that's why our forecasting and what's going to happen in the future is really important. And at the same thing, the Jerry as the CFO can only borrow from the GLA if she thinks that she will be able to repay it. But what you've got is some big movements, governed as much by the changes in the phasing of capital programmes. And
Okay, so there's this long piece of string that you've got the LLDC on up till 2013. So it doesn't have to pay back a penny of its loan then until 2013. Is that what you're saying?
No, what we have is a loan facility agreement which provides, if the LLDC were a standalone body, they'd be going out to something like the Public Works Loan Board, borrowing money and structuring those loans to repay it when they get the capital receipts.
Or they'd be declared bankrupt.
Well, yeah, but they can't borrow if they can't think it's affordable, because say we're subject to the local government finance regime. So we have a loan facility which provides the GLA to finance their net expenditure requirement as estimated in these financial plans. And each year, all they can borrow is up to the maximum of what the mayor has agreed their borrowing limit has been. And each year, there is a repayment if there is capital receipts of coming that year, and it's structured around it's a facility. We charge them 50-year PWLB rates, and if I'm saying in a position when they can't afford to repay, the GLA will have two options. It'll have to impair that loan. Well, clearly, I don't want to get in a position where the GLA has to impair that loan, and if they can't repay, the LLDC won't be able to do the future developments that we need in the park. So,
okay, so they haven't paid back a penny of their previous loan, and they've now got a new loan of 78 on top of their original.
Yes, and when the capital receipts from the developments comes in, it gets repaid to the GLA.
And that will be a timeline working to 2030.
This will go on as long as this facility is in place. As I say, we're basically on, at the moment, 50-year rates,
Just in terms of confirming the principle that we do repay, we have started making, so out of Trouble Manor where the first developments have come through, those receipts come through and are and paid over. That's already established, and therefore the principle is being put into effect.
Can I just go back to Martin, because he has been with this project from the start. Is this what you expected to happen? I mean, is there any other example of this sort of stretching of this elastic? We promise we'll pay, but we can't pay, but give us more. And then, and don't worry about it, because by 2030, where you all have magicked up because we'll have all the receipts in the world.
But it's in a way it's a consequence of, it's underpinned by a long-term business plan that the GLA has agreed.
Right.
So, you know, any borrowing cannot exceed the borrowing limit set by the mayor. So if the LLDC were in a position that we need more money than the mayor's agreed, they can't have it. So it's within the defined limits which we set annually. And as I say, it's underpinned by a long-term forecast.
We'd be acting illegally.
Yeah.
We'd be acting illegally if we borrowed without being able to show we can repay.
You don't have to go to a bank and give the same sort of... You don't know, subject to the same rigours as another company, are you? You just come over, see Martin and say, give us another couple million. You know.
I think the process is much more rigorous than
Is
that.
it? I hope so. I blooming well hope so. Because let me put
It
you
is
on...
the same.
Let's be clear here. When we talk about GLA monies, we're talking about Londoners funding this. You know, so it's a serious matter that at a time when Londoners have to make choices between eating and heating, then when they see these sort of figures, they actually want, if you like, a sense that repayment will be made before such a long period, and they want a sense that there is some urgency about getting in some receipts.
I think it's really common in the public sector to take out long-term loans that get paid over a very long period of time. You know, so I don't think there's anything wrong in principle. I think this is the most efficient way of providing the capital to the LLDC, otherwise they'll be going to the market themselves. The GLA has this cash, which you would otherwise have to put on deposit somewhere, and you know. So I think. I think
Martin, I'm just trying to get a bit of assurance because I mean the LLDC would say what they're saying. You know, it's the Mandy Rice-Davies situation.
Yeah.
So I'm not expecting them to say anything different. But what I am expecting from you and from David Bellamy is a sense of urgency and to take up the concerns that we pick up whenever we go out there. You heard my colleague saying people are full, are always on the Olympic site. They are, but they also want to know, well, what sort of deal is this? So let me put it to you. If we were starting from scratch, would you really be saying that this is the same sort of deal, the same sort of relationship that you would be setting up with the LLDC?
Well, this is the relationship that we put in place because it is the most cost-effective way of providing LLDC the capital to make the capital investment that the people of that area want. I would say if
Otherwise, they'd have to go to the bank, or they'd have to be trading on the market. And so, so at the
subject
moment,
to the local government finance.
So at the moment, the bankers is Londoners that they come to through the GLA.
It's going to be the same for any mayoral development corporation. If they want capital finance, the same way as they need revenue support, that has to come from the GLA. From the GLA, the support before the devolution of things like retained business rates used to be through the government and government grants.
Okay. I mean, we will be coming back to it because we raised it in 2016. I'm sure we raised it before, so we'll be raising the financial sustainability about the LLCD again.
Absolutely, and it goes to Caroline's pigeon. That's why this is so high on our risk register, because it's these big numbers and the type of developments, you are going to get big changes between years. And David has said we've had many meetings going through how we're going to deliver what the mayor is insisting we deliver on housing, and there's an awful lot of forecasting and due diligence going on. What is going to be house price movements, what's going to be tender price movements over a long period, you know. I'm sorry, have I given the impression of being flippant?
No, Martin, I know you too long. I would never accuse you of being flippant. I just don't get a sense of urgency here, and I'm not convinced that you've got the LLDC under enough pressure, but we will continue. Have you looked at the issue about state aid implications regarding this new interest-free loan, if you like, the total interest-free loan from the GLA to the LLDC?
It's not interest free, it's charged at 50-year the PWB rates, but that are prevailing when LLDC draw down the money.
Okay, so it's not interest-free?
No, it's not interest-free.
Okay, so therefore there would be no state aid
There's no state aid,
implications?
no.
Okay, no, that's good. That's a nice answer from you. We shall return to this question again. Finished, Chair?
That was thrillingly pugilistic from my colleague. I'll pass
Well,
on.
it's our money.
It is, very much. Felt like it was your money.
Well, it is our money.
It is our money, yes.
Assembly Member Shah.
Yeah, a couple of questions, Chair. One is that we've not talked about, which I believe is still the case, there are a number of loss-making venues. What is being done to sort of further prevent those losses? And then the overarching question arising from what Jeanette has raised is that are we still looking at LLDC becoming a profit-making entity by 2030, as we've been promised?
Two very different questions there. So on the venues, and I mentioned earlier, I think the enormous number of local people using the venues, and I suppose there were four principal venues that we should talk about. The Orbit, which was previously loss-making, is now operating at a surplus, and I'm very pleased we've been able to...
Can you just repeat that, please?
Sorry?
Sorry, can you just repeat that? What you just said a little bit.
The Orbit, which was previously operating at a loss, was making a loss and incurring a deficit that we had to support. We've now turned around and is operating at a surplus. And it made a surplus in 2016-17, the first year the slide was installed at the end of June, so missed the first quarter of that year, but was in place for 3 quarters, and will be in place obviously now for the full year this year, so we're forecasting a higher surplus. So that previously loss-making venue is now generating a surplus. I suppose the two biggest usage volume venues are the Aquatic Centre and the Copper Box. On the Aquatic Centre, as Jerry said earlier, we've made, I think, great strides in reducing the subsidy that's required. It's obviously an iconic venue. We do price the use of all our venues to be comparable to venues in the boroughs in whose area we sit. And I think, and that's to ensure that the venues are accessible and usable for local people, and that reduces the income that we might otherwise generate. But through really attacking the cost base of the venue, and particularly in areas such as the utilities costs, which were very significant in the first year, we've brought that down very majorly. We've also had reduced rates requirements. So whilst the Aquatic Centre still receives a subsidy, it's dramatically reduced from what it was previously. On the Copper Box, we're now operating that so that it does generate a small surplus on its operations. It's sort of basic income and expenditure from operating. We apportion the statewide facilities management cost to the venues, and when that's taken into account, the Copper Box does make a surplus, but we've brought it make a loss, but we've brought it into a much better place through reducing the operating, and getting that into an operating surplus. And then I think the other one that, a bit like the Orbit, which we've turned round from previously loss-making into surplus generating, is 3 Mills. Not, I suppose, directly public-facing venue, but it is a trading venue from our financial point of view. And the studios business there has been very successful the last couple of years. And again, that's now operating at a surplus when, I think, from 15, 16, or prior to that, it was requiring subsidy. So the Orbit and 3 Mills, we've been able to turn around both of those into generating surpluses. We've got the Aquatic Centre and the Copper Box into much better positions, but they both do require subsidy taking into account the facilities management charges. Sorry, and then I think the second part of the question was about the long-term sustainability. I'm pretty sure in my time here we haven't promised a date at which we were going to hit a magical point where we brought the things into balance. It's always been a long-term aspiration to bring down the net subsidy requirements, through increasing the income and through reducing the cost base. But I don't think we've ever given a time frame on it, so I'm not sure the basis for the very precise year you referred to, but we are, as Gary said earlier, we're on track to improve that position. It's improved in the last year, but it remains a long-term aspiration. I don't think we can give a very definite answer to the question when we reach that point. It is so affected by the timing of those capital developments and when those income flows that come from capital development getting concluded kick in.
You mentioned that 3 Mills is making a surplus. I seem to recall at a previous meeting we were going to sell 3 Mills because it wasn't really core business. Is that still the case?
That is in discussion. It's still the case. I think we would say it's not core business for LLDC as the regeneration body for the area. It obviously has significant benefits London-wide and nationally in terms of the film studios that are now thriving there. Part of the challenge, I would say, that we are sort of wrestling with is that whilst it's got those benefits at the moment and is operating at a surplus annually at the moment, if it was to do so long-term, it requires very significant investment. So it won't carry on operating on the current basis it does without very significant investment. And for all the reasons we've already discussed around our capital position and in effect that actually running a studio's business isn't core business for us, that question of whether we would be better disposing of it or whether the wider interest London-wide and nationally in the studio's business means maybe we should hold on it. That's what's being discussed. So no firm decision on that at the moment. We are discussing it. We will take it back to our board, but it's one of the issues that are in the discussions we have with City Hall, and then we'll go through our governance once we have a direction forward.
Yeah, my understanding of the financial model of the park is really that one part will subsidise another. That's broadly speaking.
We look at it in aggregate, taking them all together. Yeah.
Rather than venue by venue, because if it was venue by venue, you'd probably close most of them down and there'd be no legacy, which makes perfect sense. Has the position on 3 Mills moved then, since it was last discussed at a public meeting? Because the impression I had at that time was they were getting rid of it. What you said just now
So let me be slightly more precise. In very late 2014, we'd started exploring the market for a potential sale. And there'd been an exercise to gauge market interest in acquiring the site. We stopped that process because there was potential synergies with the Culture and Education District partners coming in, and so we put that potential sale process that hadn't gone into an actual sale. It was market sounding, and we stopped doing that at that point, and we've focused on operating it as efficiently as possible and maximising the revenue. In the meantime, we are at a point where we can reconsider whether we should sell it or hold it, and with those wider considerations in play. And so, again, I haven't got a definite answer to say which of those we're doing, but I think it's a question that will get resolved in the next few months. But the answer to your question, it has moved on in 2 respects. We've turned it around, so it's now actually not a drain on our resources at the moment. It's contributing to the overall position in the way you described. But it's an open question again now because it's not got there's no constraint on us making a decision about the future use.
Okay, that's fine. Assembly members' side.
Chair, this is a different point completely. It's about the business rate situation. I want to put this question, just for my own clarification, how these things work. I saw in the press recently, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, if I can just go through my understanding situation, West Ham so far have not paid anything in terms of business rates. So the writing is a bit with my glasses. Some 16 months, West Ham had to pay, they only pay rates on rental and office spaces, it lets, rather than the entire stadium. And this means that E20 foots the remainder of the annual £2.3 million business rate bill. The valuation office agency have now got involved, and apparently they're sort of in discussions with yourselves. as to who pays what in terms of this £2.3 million bill. And LLDC has been quoted as saying that should the valuation office agency be the opinion that West Ham's occupation means the necessary tests of occupation required for separate assessment following consultation with the ratepayer, any necessary alterations will be made. Well, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
But, I mean, don't these things get worked out right at the beginning, some 16 months ago? I mean, correct me if I'm missing something out here, but it just seems to me incredible.
I think it's been clear. It might
if
not
the
have
person
been.
out on the street would think £2.3 million business rate bill being footed by you and West Ham, just like with some other things, just gets away with it?
So I think the rates obligation falls where the ownership sits, and E20 has the West Ham has a concession agreement which gives it rights on a certain number of days per year to use the stadium. So the business rates are an obligation of E20. The level of rates that are being paid actually is subject to an appeal. So I think that is in play at the moment and uncertain where that will be resolved. But the basic facts at the moment are, as you said, but that it is being appealed. There's a separate exercise, as you said, that the valuation office agency is exercising, looking at West Ham's, the part of the site that West Ham fully controls, such as its own offices, as to whether those are going to be charged rates direct to West Ham. But that's something between the valuation office and West Ham direct.
Moving on to our final section now. There's only a couple of tidy-up questions, and Assembly Member Prince is leading on that.
Thank you, Chairman. We've talked about the break-even position probably being around about 2030. But as you all know, the Mayor in September suggested that the LLDC could be wrapped up within the next few years, which is, I would suggest sooner than 2030. So, Mr. Bellamy, how realistic is this expectation, and what would that mean for the future of the site?
Chair, firstly, I think I would say that certainly we haven't talked about 2030 and the surplus. Members of the committee may have. In terms of the Mayor's view, clearly LLDC is a mayoral development corporation, and therefore its remit is to develop the area and achieve the benefits that we've been discussing this afternoon. Clearly, that is not an ongoing mission in the same way as running a transport network or policing the city is, and so therefore the Mayor views LLDC as a time-bound body, and it will not exist forever. Clearly, ultimately, a view will have to be taken on when the LLDC has achieved its mission and it's appropriate to put whether a successor organisation or whether to disperse responsibilities to other quarters. And we'll need to take a view on that in due course. We also would need to take a view on whether that is a kind of, if you like, a big bang process where LDC does absolutely everything it does today until a fixed date, and then you turn off the lights and other people pick things up, or whether there's a gradual transfer of responsibilities as LLDC completes its work in particular aspects. So that's the kind of philosophy behind it, if you like. In terms of where we are, our view is that we can't get into those discussions until we have more clarity about the ongoing costs and revenues associated with running the park, which really mean certainty around the stadium situation, certainty about the Culture and Education District, where we're probably quite nearly there on that one, and certainty around housing delivery, as we've discussed. When we have those things, we should be able to have a much more of a steady state view of the income streams and the costs of the park year by year in the long term, and that then puts us in a position where we can discuss with partners, principally the boroughs but other organisations, about what the future might look like and when and how such a transition might occur. And so, the Mayor's been quite open that process is going to occur at some point. He's written to the borough leaders expressing that. It's in the role profile for the chair of the LLDC to look at this, and it's also in the role profile for David's successor as well. And so we're quite open about the fact that this process is going to happen, but it's clearly absolutely essential that it's done in the right way, and we won't start that, as I say, until we've got more clarity on park finances. And when we do get to that point, you know, it's something that we'll consider and consult on very carefully.
Can I don't think there's an inconsistency between the two sides of, as David's just described, around thinking about what a future transition might look like, and the fact we do financial projections looking at the sustainability, if you like, of the whole of the park and our estate. We do those sort of blind to which sort of organisation is it. You know, it could be us or it could be a successor. We're looking at the income and expenditure and the flows, and we do that much longer term than the period we expect the organisation to be in place for.
Sorry, just a bit of clarity first of all. Mr. Bellamy, did you say that you have not discussed profitability by 2030, or that you have?
But we have not.
You've not. You've not.
No.
But Mr. Goldstone, that is a target that you've set yourself, is it not?
No, we've never. I said a few minutes ago, we've never referred to any specific point at which we'd.
Right. So on the 14th of December 2016, at the Budget Monitoring Subcommittee, you did not say, or you did not give them 2030 as a target to break even.
I'm sure you're going to show me a minute. I don't believe I did. I think we've always said the same thing, which is a long-term aspiration. If you
yes, it's a long-term aspiration.
Yeah. I don't think I've never put a time frame on it. And
Chair, the note we have clearly states here that the Chief Executive has previously touted 2030 as a target for a profitable LLDC.
Yes. In fairness, and because we could go round and round on this point for quite some time, we don't have a transcription of that in our briefing. We do have a reference that you may have said that at that meeting. I don't think we should get too hung up on that, because I agree. I don't think Mr. Goldson was saying that as a hard, fast stop.
One has to be very careful when to rely on these briefings anyway. Can I, having made that clarification or not, can I then ask, so Mr. Bellamy, so when the Mayor said within the next few years, which I always believe to be somewhere around about 3, he really meant at some point in the future?
I think what I would say is that we expect to start thinking about it within the time frame you talk about. That's why, as I say, we put it explicitly there in terms of what we're asking the new chair to do, and it's why we've put it there in the role profile for David's successor as well. So we do expect to be thinking about it in those timescales.
Well, that's not, with all due respect, Mr. Bellamy, that's not what he said. He suggested that the LLDC could be wrapped up within the next few years. Not that you would think about possibly getting round to wrapping up. And I absolutely accept, Mr. Bellamy, all the difficulties that you have, and it would be probably madness to wrap it up before you've sorted out a load of these conflicts that currently exist. I absolutely get that. But I'm just... So this criticism is not aimed at you, it's aimed at why would the Mayor say that it could be wrapped up within the next few years when indeed we'd be very, very lucky to resolve most of those issues within the next few years?
I think if you take a few years, it's like, and we're to say, well, you could be looking at 2022, 2023, I think that is a possible scenario. We haven't done the work, so whether that actually will happen or not is premature to say. But certainly in the next mayoral term, reaching that point where LDC is either wrapped up or significant of its responsibilities are moved on, certainly it is a possibility.
So, just for clarity then, are we saying that if all the bits and pieces slot in together, if we resolve a number of the outstanding difficult issues, which, accept that it would be the Mayor's current aspiration to wind up the LLDC?
The LLDC clearly is going to wind up at some point. The Mayor wouldn't wish it to exist for longer than it needs to. So I think some of the boroughs would like to get their planning powers back and would like to take on from the LDC's achievements. And as you say, when the best time and the best way of doing that and how things will transfer and where to is a piece of work that we do want to get to when you rightly say we've addressed the more pressing matters.
I think I'll leave it there, Mr Chairman.
Okay, Assemblymember Shah.
Mr Bellamy has partially answered my question. I was going to ask whether some of the powers of MDC could be sort of handed over earlier to the boroughs, and I was going to ask you about planning powers. Is this something that you would be looking into as to what could be handed over at an earlier stage until you establish the profitability of park? Is that what you might have in mind?
So it is certainly a possibility that planning could be handed over sooner and LLDC could focus on other matters. That is a possibility. We won't, as I say, we won't consider any of these possibilities until we've sorted out some of the things we've been talking about this afternoon, and we have a clearer long-term financial view of the park. And that's really what our focus is, I think, in the months ahead. And then when we've got to that point, then it's the right time to start asking some of those questions and talking to colleagues and stakeholders about that.
Thank you.
That's fair enough.
Yeah,
okay.
Just a quick comment on that. And I understand, and this is something we've discussed, and nothing being said I disagree with. There is a reason why, if you like, the bag of functions that are together. And I think, we've talked about some of the challenges we face at the moment, but I think overall the objectives we've got around the transformation, the creation of jobs, the creation of housing, the activating the park and making it popular and attractive to local people, developing the culture and education district, those things are, I think, it has been a successful programme over a number of years, which is delivering what it was intended to. And some of that is because those functions are together. And I think, what will inform the discussion about what's the right time frame for dissolution is to say, when do you reach the point where it doesn't make sense to have them together anymore? And, that's a question about, when those benefits are seen to have been achieved, or that you don't need to have functions together anymore. And I just think that will be part of the discussion. But, obviously it could be in the Mayor's hands or others' hands to say we could disband it sooner. But I think there is a logic to what's been put together that's worked well so far, and will be part of the consideration when the case for looking at different structures comes through.
Okay, thank you very much. That takes us to the end of our session with the LLDC. Can I ask members to thank guests for attending this afternoon, and particular thanks to Mr Goldstone, who is making his final appearance. He will, I think, be dragged in here for the plenary meeting in a couple of weeks, but this is the last time he'll be in front of either the Budget and Performance or Budget Monitoring Subcommittee. You've been very generous with your time and your contributions over the years, both at the LLDC and before that at Transport for London, so thank you very much. And formally and in public, best wishes for your new role in the new year. Members, we are requested to note the discussion today. Thank you very much. Item 6 is the Mayor's decision list between the 9th of June and the 28th of September. We are requested to note those.
Noted.
Are there any issues we'd like to refer to the Budget and Performance Committee for detailed discussion?
None.
Excellent. Payments over £250, we're requested to note that as well.
Noted.
Date of the next meeting is Wednesday the 13th of December in
Noted.
Committee Room 5.
Sorry, the AOB, I got something.
Pardon me?
I got something on the AOB, which is not urgent.
You're getting ahead of me because I'm just about to get to AOB. So item 9 is any other business.
I should just say that I did get an email from the monitoring officer's office at 1:31. I was expecting them to call me.
Right, okay.
So just to clarify what I said earlier.
Okay. So we don't need to duff anyone. Well, that's good news.
And it's a she, not a he.
Yes, the monitoring officer has changed. It's not Ed Williams anymore, it's Rebecca. Right, so moving on. Under any other business, members, just indulge me for 30 more seconds. We did discuss the possibility of tabling a summons for the Moore Stevens paperwork before the meeting. In light of answers today, my suggestion, which I'm looking for your approval for, is that we don't do that today. The Chief of Staff has indicated that he is meeting with Moore Stephens on Friday and will write to us at the conclusion of that meeting, and I think it's only right for us to let that process take effect. But we will reserve our position on that and wait to hear back from you, Mr. Bellamy, if that's useful. Sounds like we're in agreement there.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you, members, and thank you, guests. Meeting is over.
GLA Chamber Sound.